Well, I'm trying a different way today. Uh, so, anyway, Psalm 105. I talked about the very first part of the very first verse last time. Give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name. And then the psalmist goes on, make known among the nations what he has done. Now, for most of us, the idea of uh, making God's works, what he has done, known to the nations, it's a little out of our grasp. Um, uh, the majority of people in the world don't travel outside of their home environments, their cities and states and country. So, what do you do with this thing of proclaim his name and make known among the nations what he has done? Well, hmm. It, what I'm going to say kind of sounds like a get out of jail free card for a lot of us. But one of the ways that I can uh, make known what he's done among the nations is by financially and prayerfully supporting those who are among the nations. I have lots of friends who are on mission fields. They're out of the United States and they are engaged with a second culture. Why would I not want to be useful and helpful to them? At least financially and at least in my prayers. I bet you know missionaries. I bet you know people who are in a second or third culture where they are proclaiming among the nations what God has done and is doing. The point is the message, get the message out. In Matthew, the last chapter of Matthew's biography of Jesus, chapter 28, verse 19, Matthew records Jesus said, go into all the world. When I was a kid, I thought, well, first of all, if you had told me that when I was a senior in high school, even if a senior in college, that God would have taken me the places, geographic places that he has almost around the world, but across the globe, I wouldn't have believed you. I mean, how's a kid from Stillwater, Oklahoma, going to do that? But in God's sovereignty, in his what's the word I'm looking for? In his providence, he's done it. I've gone places. I've been able to speak about Jesus and for Jesus in places far flung. And I'm grateful for that. For most of us, I think to make known among the nations what God has done should start right, whatever your address is. That's where it should start. There are a lot of us who, some of it is we're just afraid. Some of it is, sorry, but we're lazy. And some of it uh, is temperamental. We're introverts. Well, okay, given all that, we still have this, I'm going to call it a basic privilege. And yes, it's a responsibility, but what a privilege that the God of the universe has deemed that you and I, inadequate, broken, limited human vessels, would carry his message to the nations. Why don't you start with your neighbor? Why don't you start with somebody you work with? Why don't start with your circle of friends? There's an aspect of this. I know it's a bunny trail, but maybe it's worth going down. It's been years ago now that I read a statistic that makes tons of sense to me. When an adult experiences conversion, their circle of friends is mainly non-Christians. But as time passes, the circle of friends become more and more exclusively other Christians. This is just a sociological phenomenon, but one that we can, on an individual level, we can change this phenomenon only if we are intentional. And here's what the intention requires: that we would put ourselves in a position to encounter unsaved people. I know of a guy, he's a friend but not a close friend, who, when he changed cities, moved to a new city, he started looking for a tavern, a bar, where he would have lunch every day. Not a restaurant, a bar. Why? For crying out loud. Because that's where lost people go. And he didn't stand on the table and start screaming out with the 30-pound family Bible in his arms. He just started forming relationships. And out of those relationships came conversions, adult conversions. Now, you may not be wired for that. This guy is a pretty out there kind of guy. And this is not what I would consider or call a normal thing, but man, the concept is, if I'm going to wait for the non-Christians in my neighborhood to find their way to the church where I attend and hear a message that provokes and stimulates them toward Jesus, this is just me, but I think you got to be a pretty strong Calvinist to believe that's how it happens. I think, here's my experience, most people show up at church because somebody invited them. And those invitations are most powerful when the relationship is strong and healthy. The other side of that coin is the Barna Group does all kinds of statistical studies and surveys. And I read one of their surveys was that 75% of people in America would go to church at the invitation of a friend. Really? Well, yeah. That's 75 people out of 100. Most people know 100 people. Now, you can't be close to 100 people. But when you think about if you know lost people, 75% of those lost people would go to church with you if you invited them. But most of us in our minds have that flipped on its head. We think that 25% of them would say yes, and 75% would just be, okay, land the plane here, Stevie boy. When God works in my life, and he's never not working in my life, sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes I'm distracted by all kinds of stuff, and I'm not paying attention, but he is never not at work. Okay, so there are people who don't know him, and here's the thing. Until they know him, their eternal destiny is hell. Heaven's real, and so is hell. And because of that, I've got to become intentional about connecting with, forming a friendship with people who don't know Jesus so that I can somehow introduce them to him. Now, I could use this as a hammer, and I could just, pound away and try and elicit so much guilt that you'd get off the couch and out of the lazy boy and out of your house, and you'd start hunting down lost people. I don't want to do that. That's, gosh, for all of my growing up years, that's what evangelism was. It was a hammer. It was probably the most guilt-producing thing in my life. But all of that guilt didn't motivate me to find lost people, build a relationship, and introduce them to Jesus. So, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a challenge. I think it would be in all of our best interests to consciously, intentionally make a plan and then invest effort toward building a relationship with somebody who doesn't know Jesus. This is going to be hard for a lot of us. I evaluated my circles and realized in that circle, right now in my life, I don't have anybody in that circle who's not already saved. All my friends, all of my existing relationships are with saved people. I'm going to have to figure that one out. Well, maybe you will too. It's worth trying to figure out, though. Because I want to be able to make known among the nations what he has done. And I want to start right here on Hines Avenue in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I am so grateful that God has honored me by giving me the opportunity to go to a variety of nations. I want to seize on that. And I want to continue to offer prayerful and financial support to people who are out there doing that. Maybe at the end of the year is a good time for you to think about what you could do in terms of helping and supporting those who are out there. Okay, my time's up. I'll call it quits and see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.